found interesting when I was reading your book, I mean, the fact that you either inadvertently or deliberately reveal how inept the Congress really was in all this time. And I speak in terms of both the Islamic movement, the leaders of the Islamic movement who constantly pushed for more real estate, more, all of that, more power. And also they were inept against the British. So, in fact, I remember thinking, well, not much has changed with the party since then. I just wanted to know, in your considered opinion, given the amount of reading that you've done, these early moderates, they were called moderates, and they were very obsequious and eager to please the British. Why do you think that was so ingrained in them, this need to want to please and want to give in? That is one question. And the tag to that is, it also led to this, especially as students, our generation, we were taught to kind of view the extremists and the revolutionaries in a very negative light. So much so that they're reduced to being footnotes in the history of the Indian freedom struggle. So can you please talk a little bit about this, because it came as a revelation to me,
See, I think perhaps you may want to draw a leaf out of the present as to why are people so obsequious when it comes to certain pieces which are published in the Washington Post or the New York Times in independent Bharat.
Correct.
Right? Now, if that is our position after having enjoyed the benefits of independence for 70 years, then perhaps you must give, or let's say cut some slack to those people who were still living under the yoke of the British Empire, because the glitz and the power and the spread of the empire was in your face.
That's true.
Right? And the education system wasn't exactly helping your cause. Right? You have to realize that the revolutionaries and the extremists on the one hand and the moderates on the one hand, all of them were English educated.
Correct.
They'd been to London.
Yes.
So Savarkar was educated in London.
Yes.
Aurobindo was educated in London. Netaji was meant to be in the civil service, ICS, right? So that means some people were completely affected by the education system, and some people managed to survive the education system and still retain their roots. That is the exact situation today, right? That's the exact problem today. Some of us have managed to hold on to our Indic roots despite the education system, and those people who either did not have an extended community background or a family that insisted on those roots obviously gave in. Okay, or there were obviously certain careerist decisions that were taken to further certain positions, which you should always account for, because this is politics at the end of the day. All of them were politicians.
Yes.
Okay, except the revolutionaries, most of them were politicians. Okay, and for someone to take a position against the colonizer when he can actually be accommodated with some kind of a powerful position in the colonial establishment would make him less of a politician and more of a revolutionary. So, for instance, I'd give the benefit of the doubt to somebody like a Tilak who has done this, who was imprisoned over and over again for sedition.
Correct.
And not given any kind of comfortable treatment like Mahatma Gandhi or Mohandas
Gandhi
or anybody else. Right? The man was sent to Mandalay for 6 years. They attempted to break his spirit. Okay, he comes back and again starts the home rule movement. Look at the courage there, right? So these are very different examples. The interesting part is Annie Besant was much more Hindu and Indian than Gokhale.
Exactly.
So this was perhaps an example of the white person going native and the native going white. These are the two examples.
Beautiful. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I would say you will have to attribute this to the fact that Europe was at the zenith of its powers, and in particular Britain, right? And you were being trained in the education system. The carrot that was being dangled in front of you was that you will be a part of this particular structure, this power structure, should you actually accept our ways. Okay, and we are also telling you that it's possible for both these identities to coexist. Let's create a hybrid modern narrative where we pull you out of the darkness and you get to retain some portions of the darkness, but also whiteness. Okay. So that, I think, explains to a significant extent their position, and the literature is very clear. So you see, C. Sankaran Nair, as part of his book, where he speaks of Gandhi and anarchy, clearly blames Gandhi for Khilafat, rightly so. But in some of his previous speeches, see, Sankaran Nair says, we were taught English, we were told to think in English, our novels are in English, our heroes are in English, our newspapers are in English, our political science in English. Why should we not aspire for English ideals?
Correct.
He makes it bluntly clear, right? And this is a generation after Gokhale, hopefully. I think, yes, after Gokhale, because he was a contemporary of Gandhi.
Right.
Okay. So at the very least, you're looking for significant investment in the soul of the society through the education system from 1835, thanks to Raja Ramohan Roy's efforts. From then on, at least until the founding in 1885, you're looking at a 50-year period. So at the very least, you're looking at two generations, assuming that a generational span is 25 years.
Correct.
So what? And by the time you reach the 1900s, you shouldn't be surprised that you produced Jawaharlal Nehru. He is not the fount of it; he is the product of the system.
Product, right?
It's not as if he is engendering something because he is the father of it. He is the child of it. So when you look at these issues, coupled with the fact that unlike the Islamic society, you have not held on to your religious institutions, you have not held on to your native languages, you have not been able to identify what is the language that I wish to protect, and they're talking of Urdu across the board. You don't even want to pit Sanskrit against Urdu. You don't want to even present it as an option. Clearly, your linguistic roots are on a sticky wicket. Your religious identity is on a sticky wicket. You are left with only one thing in that head of yours, which is secular English education.
Education.
Every other umbilical cord that ties you to your native society is gone. That is the answer.
That is absolutely true, and it is as deep rooted as that, as you rightly mentioned, and it goes back a long way. We only unfortunately think of it in terms of Gandhi, Nehru, but like you rightly pointed out, it goes back further back in time. My question is also, I mean, since we're dwelling on this point, I've always wondered personally how we don't talk of it, but color. Do you think color plays a role here? Do you think we as Indians are genetically somehow? Do we look at the white color? Even the let's say the Islamic invaders in the initial period, they all came from a land where there was, racially well, in terms of color at least, light skinned. Do we have this thing in us? I mean, I'm just asking you out of curiosity.
See, what happens is, I think human psychology, to the limited extent I understand it, is once you go through a phase of defeat and you're also accepting defeat at the most fundamental level possible, which is to say spiritual, cultural, civilizational, then the next question in your headspace is, what are the qualities that make the other side successful?
Right.
Right? And therefore you try to mimic and imitate those qualities. This works at the individual level as well. Right? What do you tell people? Learn from him because he succeeded.
Correct.
At the macro level, that's the exact question that you should be asking. Right? Second, when you're also being presented the vision that whiteness and superiority and civilizational superiority go hand in hand, your mind starts accepting that some of these traits are ethnic in nature, they're racial in nature. So you start imputing to some of these qualities a certain pseudo-scientific basis. So you might as well say, oh, no. Even today, I have a lot of people who are in the West who have this tendency to say, oh, if he comes from the West, then I'm absolutely sure that his documentation must be impeccable. Right? I've heard this so often. With that cutting accent, they say this. Okay.
Yes.
As if, come on, man. Our scripture has been preserved for over 7,000 years. And you're telling me that's without documentation. Right? And the way we are in a position to identify a flaw in something that's been passed down for 7,000 years with a fantastic ability to identify what is the mistake in a particular, let's say, intonation, the way you go up and down, or a particular line. Is that possible with the documentation? Right? So I think when you're in the throes of a massive complex, okay, which is also being drilled into you thanks to the curriculum which I presented in the first book, what kind of curriculum was presented, then you end up accepting that it is your destiny to serve and it is their destiny to rule.
That's true.
Okay. Those who rebelled against it were rebelling against a sea of opposition where it was treated as the normal. And therefore, Gokhale brands those people who are asking for complete independence as lunatics who must be committed to mental asylums.
Unbelievable that he had that position.
And this is, he is someone who lives, or let's say his time period is not that far away from the Sepoy Mutiny or the First War of Independence, 1857. And he believes
Correct.
that those who rebel against establishment must be treated as lunatics.
Lunatics.
In which case, my sympathies and my admiration for those who were nationalists, who were extremists, who were revolutionaries, in that period only goes up. Because you're not fighting against the other side, you're equally fighting against your own people.
Your own entrenched thought process.
You must be, so what would they say? To put it in Telugu, they'll say, Batuku Telugu leni vallu.
Correct.
Right? Impractical people who don't know how to survive. Right? No wonder they were relegated to the margins. But it was these people who really kept the British on their toes, which is what I'm trying to show through the book. Bomb blast
Yes.
after bomb blast after assassination on a regular basis.
Yes.
Which means they understood. In a civilizational war, I'm sorry, you can't say I'm going to give up one option entirely and commit myself to peace, knowing fully well that the other side is capable of a Jallianwala Bagh. But you only know of Jallianwala Bagh. What they don't tell you is, and since we speak of several of our army units with pride, maybe it's important for us to even point this out. The Gurkha soldiers under the regiment of the Commissioner of Bengal, rather the newly appointed Governor of Bengal, J.B. Fuller, went house to house raping women.
Oh my God.
They went house to house raping women under the instructions, obviously, of the government, but it was our own people who were doing this. Are you telling me that the soldiers who were killing people at Jallianwala Bagh were all non-Indians? No, not at all. So it went to such an extent, and the rapes would be committed in public and in broad daylight, only to actually shame the Hindu population. Only the Hindus, by the way, not the Muslims. Because the partition of Bengal was supported by the Muslims, because it gave a Muslim majority province.
Correct.
So this treatment was meted out by these regiments to Hindu population. Now, how many of us are comfortable accepting these realities?
No,
Let's talk about it. And
No.
then we should ask ourselves, what is the composition of the Indian Army today? Is it a refashioned British Indian Army? What are the practices, or let's say the traditions, that this army at this point valorizes or celebrates? No company or unit of the army should be celebrating any victory because it was a victory against an Indian state or a princely state. And if you go to some of these cantonments, the paintings that they have are celebrating the victories of Wellesley and others.
Correct.
Right? Look at the warped mindset that we have inherited at this point. How is this truly being independent?
True.
Are you at least refashioning the Indian army on the lines of the INA or any other revolutionary army? You're not. Because you see, the Israeli Defense Forces are a combination of two militias who were rebelling against the British. One is Haganah and the other was another division. Both these militia were merged together to create the army of Israel, in Israeli Defense Forces, IDF. That's not the case with us.
We are not. We're just we're actually perpetuating the colonial traditions. I know.
Fortunately, we're making changes there.
We are.
No wonder the government is making those changes.
Yes.
I'll give you an example. and you'll understand the extent of the rot. I was at a TEDx talk 3 years ago, or maybe 4 years ago. One of the other speakers was a retired member of the armed forces who had served several years in Kashmir. Full credits to the work that he had done and the sacrifice that he had made. His analysis of the situation was that these are misguided youth. This was the analysis of the situation by someone who served there, who believed that the terrorists were misguided youth. After multiple genocides and after a clear rebellion against the Indian state. If this is what the armed establishment or the armed forces establishment is populated with, and this is the level of thinking, what strategic thinking are you expecting from the institution?
True.
I'm hoping that they've made a move from there and then transitioned to a particular phase. I was aghast. It so happens that Dr. Anand Ranganathan and I were at the same, event, and we were looking at each other and saying, "Gayi bhais pani mein."
Correct.
That's the end of the matter. If this is what they think, they don't even know the nature of the beast that they're dealing with.
No. And the nature of the armed forces is such that the structure is such that they're not allowed to even question the certain established paradigms that they're already there,
Correct.
that they have been fed. So it is the most secularized institution, right?
It is.
And they take pride in the fact that they have it. I mean, I'm a product of a 4G background, so I know how it is. There are some redeeming features, I will not deny, but the fact that what you're saying is what you're talking about is what is the dangerous part of it, where if, because these are the men who are there at the border, they are the ones who are dealing with the enemy with the rifles and the ammunition. And if
Correct.
you don't know, like you said, Shatru Bodh, if you don't know the enemy, then what are we fighting? What do you know? I mean, you're vulnerable, right? You're
Correct.
weakened your position
Because
already.
we are prone to thinking that, oh, the army is significantly indie because of their war cries. Jai Shri Ram, Ramchandra ki Jai.
Yes.
And therefore we believe, no, 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 all of this is the case. No.
Mm. Mm.
The war cries were left to the devices of the units so that they could inspire each other. Okay.
Yes.
But in terms of its overall structure, in terms of the overall mentality, it is a secular institution to the extent that it really doesn't understand the problems and the adversaries.
Very true.
I
Very true.
genuinely believe that the strategic establishment of the Indian state is fortunately different from the armed forces establishment.
Mm.
Okay.
Mm.
And therefore, it understands the Pakistan state and the Pakistani mindset better than the armed forces to a significant extent, is my understanding of it. Okay.
Mm.
I could be entirely wrong. I'm sure there are people who know better than me on this particular subject. But when I heard this, I thought this is a serious problem. And
Problem.
therefore, if this problem exists in the institution that is supposed to protect us, right,
Mm.
then we are in an extremely vulnerable and precarious position.
Position. True. True. And this problem doesn't exist with the Pakistani army. They're very clear who the enemies are.
We've always been crystal clear.
Very clear.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.